But you know, one thing that I encourage people to do, especially when they question some of the things I say, that we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that, always put it in light of sort of a foreign policy golden rule. What would we think if people did that to us? What would we think? Although many reasons have been given for why people hate us and want to come here to kill us, that really the truth is they tell us the truth. They tell us why they hate us. Bin Laden told us the truth, and the truth is they cannot stand occupation and control of their land, as we would not either. Bin Laden had a plan. He was going to get us very angry, and he was going to drag us into a war, and he wrote this. He said this. He says, I'm going to drag the Americans into a war just as we dragged the Soviets into a war. And of course, we were on the side of those people who said the Soviets had no right to occupy Afghanistan, and we fought with the precursor of the Taliban to get rid of the Soviets. So Bin Laden says, I'm going to drag them into their war and bog them down in endless war. And he says, you know what? We'll drive them into a bankruptcy. This is serious stuff, because we are bankrupt and we are bogged down. We're in 5 wars. And remember, as conservatives, you have to remember what was said many years ago about war. War is the health of the state. If the state is the enemy of liberty, the bigger the government to run your life and to run the economy, the less liberty you have. So war is the health of the state, and we have endless war, and they're continuously going on. All great nations have ended not because of military confrontation. We did not have to confront the Soviets. We let them self-destruct because they spent too much and got bogged down. I would say it's time for us to give up that obligation of being bogged down in so many countries of the world. We are now in over 130 countries. We are now have military bases of over 900. We are not going to be leaving Iraq. We are not going to be leaving Afghanistan or Pakistan. We are going to expand our presence there. We're building embassies in all these countries. The embassy in Iraq is bigger than the Vatican, or is at least the size of the Vatican, costs $1 billion. And you think we're going to leave all those bases? No, we're there because we are going to argue the case, at least behind the scenes. They argue the case. We have to protect our oil. But what are our enemies doing? What are our political enemies of recent years doing? The Vietnamese, as well as China. China has become, you know, the manufacturer of the world, selling us goods, and we borrow money. We're the greatest debtor in the history of the world, and the Chinese have $3 trillion in the bank. What are they doing? Are they going around invading countries? And having their people get killed and bankrupt in their country? No, they're making money, and they are buying up oil interests. They're making deals. And unfortunately, our foreign policy has driven so many countries into the hands of the Chinese. The coalition now has gotten to be India, Russia, and China, and Iran. And who's a close buddy now of Iran? Iraq. We turned Iraq over to the Shiites, and the Shiites run Iran. So our policies, no matter how well intended, and no matter what the argument may have been, have totally backfired on us. And we need to change the foreign policy. We need a pro-American foreign policy. Here at home, we are steadily losing our liberties. We're losing our economic liberties. We don't own our own property. We can't use our property unless we pay our taxes and follow all the regulations from not only the federal government and the state government and local government, but from the UN coming down on us and telling us what we can do with our land. It's a very good reason to support my bill that would get us out of the UN and the IMF and the World Trade Organization. You know, the good intentions always get out of control. There's a good intention done by the Food and Drug Administration. Make sure your food is safe. Who's against safe food? Everybody's for safe food. But do we need the FDA? So now what the FDA is doing and why they feel so compelled to protect you, they will arrest you if you start drinking raw milk that you happen to cross a state border. What is so dangerous about you making your own choice about whether or not you can drink raw milk? I think we ought to vote for the right to drink raw milk. Now there's another good intention. The good intention that people not use drugs stupidly. And there's a lot of that goes on. But there's a lot of stupid use of prescription drugs, too, that we're not doing a very good job on. But you know, up until 1937, smoking marijuana was legal. It was still stupid, it was legal, but all of a sudden we decided we were going to outlaw it. Well, nobody's outlawed marijuana. More people smoke it now than ever before. But some states, and I'm not familiar with this state, but some states have legalized the use of marijuana for medical reasons. You know, how compassionate, you know, how not compassionate could that be? Shouldn't people be allowed to make that choices? And as a physician, I can tell you there have been people dying with cancer. They can't hold their food down, and they're taking chemotherapy, and they get benefit. But we shouldn't be afraid of people making their own choices. But let's disregard that for a minute. But because marijuana is illegal and because the plant looks a little bit like hemp, we're not allowed to raise hemp in this country. Hemp is a very, very good product, and if you want to get high on hemp, you have to smoke a cigarette as big as a phone pole. And yet, you know, they're hysterical about it. I mean, it's irrational. But hemp is a fantastic product. It makes better alcohol. I mean, it makes better ethanol than does corn. It makes clothes. It has all kinds of product. It was very helpful in World War II. And so many of these jobs now went to Canada. Canada takes the hemp, they raise the hemp, they make these products, and they sell them back to us. And then we wonder where our jobs are going. So I would say let's legalize hemp as well. You know, because of the overburden of laws in this country, always telling us what to do economically and personally, guess what? We have more prisoners than anybody else in the world. We have 2.5 million prisoners in the world. We have 1% of our populations are in prison. And we have 5% of the population, but we have 25% of the world, of all the world prisoners. I don't think the American people are that bad. I'll tell you the truth. I really don't think we need that many prisons. My goodness. I think we have too many laws is what the problems are. Today, in the economic sphere, that is where people mostly concentrate on. But we cannot separate that, of course, from the foreign policy. But 48% of the American people now, they're polled, say that they expect that next year we will very likely have a depression. Of course, those people who have been unemployed for 3 years, they already have their depression. But we have been in a slump, a severe slump, which was a predictable event. A severe slump for 10 years. Since the NASDAQ bubble burst, our population has grown by 30 million people. But we have not added any new net jobs. That's how bad it is. So we're slipping and sliding. It's always been moderated by more handouts and more entitlements to make people feel a little bit better, and it looks like we're going to be doing that for a long time, but it eventually ends up in bankruptcy. What are we going to do with all this debt? We have pretty good history to know what will happen to the debt. The debt, our debt, Greece's debt, everybody's debt, when it gets to a certain percentage where you can't work your way out of it, it gets liquidated. How does it get liquidated? Occasionally, some countries won't pay, but that doesn't happen. Usually, the debt is liquidated by the government printing money, paying off the debt, and you're getting 50 cents on a dollar or 25 cents on a dollar, and that is what's happening today. We are fast liquidating our debt. But the economy, with all these trillions of dollars spent, have not picked up in these last few years. We got into the trouble because we believed that we could spend. We had the reserve currency. The world would take our money. They would take the money and we would get the goods and our debt would go up. We spent too much. We borrowed too much. We regulated too much. We printed too much. And we got into a predictable trouble. But guess what we've been doing for 3 years? We're regulating more, we're spending more, the deficit is exploding, we're borrowing more, and the Federal Reserve has unlimited amounts of money flowing into the system, and they think that's going to solve the problem. That will not solve the problem, let me tell you. We need to restore our confidence and belief in a free society and how markets work. We as conservatives are supposed to believe in the free enterprise system. That means you want to get the government out of the business of regulating us. But if we have a Federal Reserve, I have my way, they quit printing up the money because it's only helping out the rich at the expense of the poor. So I would stop that. But then you would say, well, where will the money come from? The money for investment has to come from savings. Well, will there be enough savings? Yes, if we change our tax code. We shouldn't be taxing savings. We shouldn't be taxing the elderly. They are saving money. And we should not, under current conditions today, because the Fed sets the interest rates for the benefit of the banks, they get the money for free and they make 2 or 3% and they made all their billions back. If you're elderly and retired and you get, what, 1 or 2% on your CD where the market rate is 6 or 7%. It's criminal. It's really bad. But we should not tax savings. We should not tax dividends. That's where capital comes from. But over $1 trillion worth of capital is sitting overseas because companies are global and they're able to channel the funds off. They make it overseas. They pay other taxes which are lower. All other countries, if you want to repatriate that money, they don't pay tax again. But we do. So all that money, $1 trillion sitting overseas that belongs to our companies, they won't bring it home because they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So I would say, let's quit taxing repatriated money and let them bring their capital home. But then you have to change the environment. You have to lower, the corporate tax is not a corporate tax. This idea, oh, let's just raise the taxes on corporations. The corporate tax is a sales tax. Corporations cannot function unless they pass it on to the consumer. So that sales tax, which the corporations collect, we should stop that so they put money into investments. They need that, and then getting the taxes lowered. Corporate tax rates should be as low as possible. The regulatory burden should be lifted from their shoulders. Now, one thing I have promised, if I am to be the President of the United States, my goal would be to freeze the Federal Register and then start shrinking it. No new regulations. Besides,